Hello and welcome to a special edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn, and we're trying something a bit new. We're doing a video interview over Skype where I'm interviewing my subjects, and we're going to put it up on YouTube. And today we're super excited to have back with us together for the first time Marisa and Carson Calderwood. It is currently Saturday, May 23rd. And 2 days ago, on May 21st, in the evening, Marisa and Carson were excommunicated from the LDS Church. And so we just want to kind of capture that story. So let's dive in. Who wants to start and kind of tell us how it happened?
Go for it.
So to start off with, we asked, when they said that we were both up for church discipline, we asked if we could do it together. We asked in an email and said, I said, I don't want the little kids excommunication, like I had said before. And so I didn't really expect that they would grant that request, honestly. But they did. They said, okay, then if you want, you can be tried in front of the entire High Council and stake presidency, and they had us come in at the same time but take turns.
Yeah, there is a stipulation in the handbook of instructions that says that if you don't want to be tried by your bishop, then you can be by the stake. And so, as women, you can do that, which we weren't aware of.
That's awesome. Yeah. I bet Kate would have preferred that.
Yeah, totally. Probably. And then we found after that, someone said that there's a bit of a precedent for it where a couple of the women who were excommunicated in the early 90s had also said the same thing, that they would rather have the full High Council.
Interesting. So, okay. Well, that's cool. So they let you come together. That's interesting. It seemed like when I was with my stake president, he wanted to deny any request I'd possibly make. And it sounds like with you guys, they were at least willing to kind of accommodate a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like our stake president, like we still feel, and we'll get into this later on, but he's a super nice guy, and he was very accommodating, and he tried to make it as amiable of a situation as he could, which we appreciated.
That's nice. Okay, so you got the go ahead to go together. What happened next?
So he invited us in at 7:30 because it officially started at 8, and he wanted to talk to us together, kind of a little bit to tell what was happening. And basically we only...
Was there a crowd in the parking lot when he got there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got there about 10 minutes early, and there were maybe about 20 people there, and then I think about 10 more people showed up after we went in.
And some people left early and some people came late, and there was probably about 45 people total that showed up, which is amazing. We're like 45 minutes from Seattle out in the sticks, and I couldn't believe that many people came.
Yeah. People drove up from central Washington a couple hours. People drove from North Seattle area an hour and a half. It was impressive, and I think that people really wanted to be there. That they were really happy to support. It was awesome.
That's so cool. So what percentage did you know versus not know?
We maybe knew 25 to 30%.
Yeah.
It was maybe
in real life,
really just a few friends, and then a ton of strangers. People that we had maybe like a couple people we had met once at the Seattle coffee meetup, and then
or at Sunstone Northwest last February.
Yeah, and then quite a few people that we had never met at all.
So shout out to those who showed up. That's just so
Definitely.
Awesome. I went to bed Thursday night so happy that there was a crowd gathered. It made me super happy.
Totally.
Yeah. It made us feel really supported, like we weren't really doing it alone. And they did have a couple from another stake who are involved in church public affairs who stayed in the lobby, and they monitored, I guess. They passed out muffins. They had like a flat of Costco muffins. So we were a little surprised, pleasantly surprised, and they passed out water bottles, but they said that no one can come in to use the bathrooms in the building. So that's part of the reason why some of the people only stayed part of the time. Because it wound up going 4 hours. So we had reserved a room at the pizza place that was close. And so people could go over there and use the bathroom and get something to eat. So it wound up working out well in that way. But there was, they locked all the doors, and they had those, the public affairs people sitting in the lobby to kind of make sure that nothing bad happened.
Okay, so you guys pass the crowd, and then you go inside. And what happened then?
Yeah, so the stake president talked to us, and he's like, I don't really want to debate doctrinal points, and I'm like, neither do we, and because we had never really done that much anyway. And we did ask. He started to read off the 4 reasons why someone could be an apostate, and I kind of interrupted, and I'm like, I've looked at those before as well. It's like 2 through 3 really don't apply to us, right? And he said he agreed, and it was mainly just number 1, which I wish I could had right here to read, but basically it was you're against the. You're against the.
It's like fighting against the
doctrines.
brethren or the church or the leadership.
Yeah, and he and I asked for some clarification. I'm like, so let's say that you give a stake conference and you say we shouldn't watch rated R movies. The prophet told us not to, and I go out and watch a rated R movie and I post on Facebook and say this movie was awesome. Everybody should go watch it. And he tells me, Brother Calderwood, we're not supposed to do that, and I go and do it again. I'm like, technically, by that definition, that's apostasy. I'm acting repeatedly against the counsel of my priesthood leaders. And he's like, so I'm like, what's the difference? I just want clarification on where the line is and stuff. And he's like, well, that's not apostasy in my book because that's not like a core doctrine of the church. It's not Jesus Christ, the Book of Mormon, the prophet. And he said, because you guys have stated publicly that you don't have a belief in the Book of Mormon, then that's why you're apostates. And I'm like, okay, that's true. And I'm like, what about the difference between, I could say, I don't believe, I could say, you shouldn't believe, and I could go out and be telling people why it's not true and they shouldn't. I'm like, there's like differences there. And he says, yeah, any of that. If you say, I don't believe publicly in the Book of Mormon or Jesus Christ, then you are an apostate. And that was a little shocking, but we couldn't deny that. I'm like, if that's the definition we're going to work with, then we agreed. We're apostates by that definition because we have publicly stated we don't have a belief in that.
So was this in the room before you went in, or is this after you went in? Okay, so you're having a discussion beforehand about the definition of apostasy and whether you qualify.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And was it just him, or did he have a...
Just him.
Okay, all right. How did he feel? Was he being nice?
Yeah. He was distraught, I told him, actually his hands were shaking really bad when he came out to shake our hands, and he's such a good guy. He does love us. He has said at times, like he understands that we're trying to do what we feel is right, and he kind of respects us for trying to help people that suffer, but he just feels, like I said in that one blog post, that it's not how the brethren are doing it, so it can't be done that way, which really is the crux of what I tried to say later on that we'll get into to kind of deal with that. But he said it later on, it was the hardest thing that he's done. So I felt bad for him.
How were you feeling, Marisa?
I felt mostly good, just nervous. I felt like I'm prepared. I know what I want to say, and it's going to be fine. Just that actually being there and in still a somewhat of an intimidating situation, I couldn't stop my leg from shaking. Like I just was nervous.
Yeah. Okay, so what was it like to go into the big room?
That was shockingly intimidating. I'm a big dude, but like the guy they had, I don't know his name, but the guy that had do the door was like really tall, taller than me. I'm 6'4". He was taller than me, and he had this really stern face. And he opens the door, and we walk in, and there's basically 16 guys all in suits standing up because the presidency, the 12 high counselors, and the
stake executive
secretary to take notes. And I didn't know as many. I thought I'd know more.
They've had a big turnover in the high council recently, and it's just a lot of guys we didn't know.
And just that long table that they're all sitting there, and it was like, whoa.
All in the black suits, and Carson on purpose didn't wear a black suit. He wore a shirt and tie and a vest. And I was in a dress. So
you guys look fabulous, by the way. That photo
thanks.
was like GQ worthy. It was
nice. Yeah, we wanted to toe that middle line between, we obviously didn't want to be offensive,
right?
But I didn't want to look like a sheep either. So I wanted to be authentic in a respectable way. I felt like
I did the same thing. I wore like a blue shirt and a blazer, but no tie.
Yeah. So it was. They came in. We sat down, and the chairs were against the wall, like about 4 feet away from the table, and we're like, look at each other, and we grabbed them and pulled them up. We're like, we're part of this conversation. And we like wanted to I don't know, establish ourselves and as a little bit having some authority in our position, that we were there for a reason and we're not just, to be subjugated, for lack of a better phrase.
It felt awkward to not be sitting close to the table.
So you scooted up.
So we scooted
Yeah.
up to the table, yeah.
Good for you. All right.
So we, the stake president just started talking out. He, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was basically, he was the only one that spoke the entire time. No one else ever said any word.
While we were in the room.
While we were in the room, yeah.
Right.
And so it was just us or him. So he started speaking. He said, I brought you here for apostasy. And he started to go over the things of apostasy that he reread that definition and agreed that 2 through 4 don't account, 1 does. And he had a big folder of things that we had said on our blog or on Facebook and stuff. And he's like, I got lots of documentation here. We're not going to go through all of it, but these are some of the things you've said. And he started off saying, like, that you believe, and he questioned us, do you believe the Book of Mormon to be a fraud? And I'm like, I don't like that word. It's too negative, too mean. I don't believe the Book of Mormon to be true. I don't believe there are actual Nephites and Lamanites, but there's good stuff in there. Maybe even some of the words in there could be inspired, but to me, it's not a literal historical document. So just saying fraud feels too harsh and negative. And basically every state, I'm like, and I don't think I really ever said fraud. And he didn't say that I did. I think he was taking what I had written, combining it into a sentence and trying to say, you believe the Book of Mormon is a fraud. So there was a little discussion back and forth on the various points of us trying to nuance it, basically.
And he made sure to ask Carson and then myself separately and distinctly.
Right.
So
yeah,
we went
and that's interesting because Jeffrey R. Holland stated in his interview with Helen Whitney for the PBS documentary The Mormons, we're not going to invite people out of the church if they can't believe the Book of Mormon's historical.
Yeah.
So it's weird that that's being used as a criteria.
Yeah.
It was sad. There's a lot of things like that. We felt like it was, we presented proof or evidence that should say this shouldn't happen, and it still did, which is why it was disappointing. But so after he got done with those things, he asked Marisa, he's like,
what just the book? What other things?
So that the church is God's one true church on the earth.
Okay.
That President Monson is a prophet of God, and that the Bible and the Doctrine and Covenants are books of Scripture. I think that was it. I think they were kind of the 4 main points, and there might have been that Joseph Smith restored the gospel.
Yeah, I don't know if he said that either.
Yeah.
But it was like with Jesus Christ, that's the only area where we probably differ too much. We're pretty unified on most things. I said I can't deny that Jesus existed. History seems to say that, but I don't believe he was born through through a virgin woman from God. I believe he lived. He might have performed some miracles, but I don't believe he is at exactly as we're taught in the church. Mm-hmm. So again, I try to nuance it, and I said I love the idea. I asked myself, what would Jesus do? Even though I don't believe he's the Son of God, because that's great. If I could be more Christ-like, then that makes me a better, happier person. And so I think a few of the things that I said like that, it was a little bit like they didn't like that. They wanted it to be black and white, and I kept trying to nuance it because that's the truth. It's not a black and white issue. That there's gradations on belief on these things, even with active members, and I kind of wanted to get that across.
Yeah. And I said the question that they had asked is if we believe that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. And so I said, I agree with Carson with what he said, that I don't believe that Christ was born from a virgin, a lot of those, things like that, but that I have a hope for Christ as the Messiah. And that I really don't know what I think about it right now. And that's really all that I can say is that it's a possibility, and it sounds nice in a lot of ways. So I just have a slightly different view of that.
More hope probably than I do.
Right.
Yeah. So then when he got done asking those questions, he said, okay, we're going to focus on Carson's apostasy now. Marisa, you can go out and wait. And she's like, well, I'd rather stay. Is that possible? And that's when they said, yeah, you can. So she sat there, and basically he's like, all right, Carson, it's your turn to speak. And I said, like, all right, I'm just going to be 10 or 15 minutes. I don't want to speak for a long time. I'm not going to debate any historical facts or anything. I just want to present a case to you why I shouldn't be excommunicated. And I felt a little silly doing this and saying this, but I actually have 5 handouts to give all you guys. So I brought 15 sheets of all 5 of my handouts, and it was a little awkward because I didn't want to take an authoritarian position in there, because I know that everything I do, they're going to see through the lens of bad person. If I had frustration, oh, it's because he's lost the spirit. If I have authority, oh, he's so prideful, he thinks he's better. And so I really wanted to be authentic without giving them anything that would make them have something they could interpret as negative. So I had the first handout, and I said, these are some of these things might be a little awkward and negative to read, but this is all truthful. And I'm like, I can promise you, the people who know me know that I've put thousands of hours of research into this for several years. And actually, sorry, I got to go back. Before I got to that point, I had to tell my story a little bit for about 2 minutes. So I said basically about how my whole life growing up, you're told if you pray about the Book of Mormon, Moroni's promise, you'll feel the Spirit and know that it's true. And I tried that several times. There's even a couple times where I literally prayed for an hour. Never having a testimony, I remember as a teenager, I'm going to pray for an hour tonight. So I sat on my knees and prayed literally for an hour without falling asleep, and did it a few times, thinking maybe since I haven't got the answer from the regular prayer, maybe doing that kind of prayer will work. And I shared all that and said I'd feel feelings of the Spirit when I would do good, but never when I prayed about the Book of Mormon, never when I prayed about the church. And even sometimes I'd feel it talking about God. And then I'd feel those same feelings when I'd watch some movie about people coming together to fight aliens. And I'm like, that was so conflicting. Why am I feeling it when I'm watching this movie and not talking about or praying about the Book of Mormon? And that conflict it created in me caused me to feel like I was broken. And I felt really sad for years because of that. And then I'd get judged from people when I would try and mention that a little bit and talk to them. And I'm like, that hurt me for years. And actually, I broke down crying when I started to talk about the judgment and the hurt that I felt. And I wasn't expecting that. And it kind of caught me off guard, and I couldn't even talk.
Was he sweet, Marisa?
Yeah. It was a shock to me,
I don't do that.
He doesn't really ever cry.
But it was good. They felt it, They felt that spirit. They felt that connection, and I could see him soft. Well, all but one guy.
It was your King of Benedict moment, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And everyone in there was really awesome except for one guy, and all of the witnesses all agreed. There was one guy in there that was pretty negative the whole time. He can't speak, but when I would say things, he would, I think without knowing it, roll his eyes. He'd look away, look down, and it bothered me because it was detracting from the feeling of love and compassion that I was getting for everyone else, and that kind of hurt. But so I said that, and I'm like, that made me made me an extra empathetic person. I see the pain that others have when they come across these doubts. And I see person A will judge person B for having doubts and say, you're a bad person, you must be sinning. And I gave an example. Someone once told me that I must be having an affair because Joseph Smith said, the people who are searching for a sign are adulterers, and therefore, since I don't have a testimony, or I'm lying about it, or I'm fooled, and I'm looking for a sign, it's because I'm an adulterer. And I shared a couple of things like that, the judgment that you get in the church when you have these doubts. And I'm like, so I talk about these issues so that person A can see that person B has legitimate concerns over these are real historical facts. If a 35-year-old man marries a 14-year-old girl, that's not good in anybody's book, and that's going to cause you pain, obviously. And so I also wanted person A to know that person B wasn't a bad person, so that they wouldn't have that tension there. And so that's why I share these things, not to hurt the church, but to help there be less pain and suffering, because that resonates with me, and it breaks my heart to see other people suffer like I had for years. And so I'm like, so because of that, that's my motivation for doing what I do. And I said, I'm going to make a case here for you guys to why doing what I do is what we all should do. And so the first handout was quotes. It was a one-page document of quotes from prophets and apostles only, saying that we can't blindly follow them. And each name was highlighted. So they saw Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, Bruce R. McConkie. And we don't know about a lot of those quotes because a lot of times we hear the other side of the story. When the prophet speaks, the thinking's been done. We have conflicting quotes from the brethren. And so I pulled out all the ones that argue that point. And I handed out the second paper, which was a bunch of really obviously not godly things that the prophets and apostles have done that we have primary sources for. Like the example, and I said, this is going to be hurtful and you might not believe me on this, but Brigham Young said if you had a child with a black woman, you would have to kill your mixed race seed and your black wife to atone for the sins of mixing your seed with the race of the African American race. And I'm like, none of you guys here think that's from God, right? And no one shook their head yes. And I'm like, that's the type of thing that mistakes that our prophets can make. Even though they're great men, they can make mistakes like that. So that's why we can't blindly follow them. And I pulled out document 3, handed it around, and it was examples of why, because of that, we have to think for ourselves. We have to talk with God, communicate with him, decide what we feel is right. And then the 4th one, which is like the big kicker, I feel like, was a list of all the programs in the church that were started with a grassroots movement. And it's pretty much 90% of the programs that we have in the church. And it was a lot of them you can actually find. Elder Clayton Christensen in 2009, so like 6 years ago, gave a talk in Boston about all that. And he said in there, and I told him this, he said, you members need to not wait for the brethren to tell you what to do. You need to go out and find ways to help people to make this world a better place. Use the Spirit to do that. And then the brethren will use the Spirit to figure out which of those things we need to apply to everybody. And so I said, we need to be that stake. We need to do this grassroots movement where we don't make people feel bad for having doubts, and we help there be greater love. And I said, there's the stake in Seattle that's been very pro-LGBTQ, and they've had meetings to invite LGBTQ people in to talk about it, and it's had an awesome effect, and the brethren have sent people to go and check it out because they've seen it, how good it's been. I'm like, we need to be that stake for the doubt issues, and we have the prophets and apostles right here telling us we need to do that. And he's saying, don't wait for the brethren to tell you what to do. We have to do it. And I kind of rested my case on that. I said, let's be that stake. Let's be more Christ-like. Let's increase the love and the understanding in the world. And that's what I'm trying to do. And kind of left it at that.
And no response, right? They were just quiet.
Yeah. So he's like, thank you. And Marisa, no, it's your turn.
Did they have witnesses come in yet?
We had our 3 that came in after us, and they had one that was our bishop.
But did they let you listen to the witnesses?
Nope, and I actually didn't want to because they were going to talk about me, and I didn't want to be there so they wouldn't feel influenced.
I got to hear my witnesses, and that was really powerful. It made it all worthwhile because it was such a negative experience. But
yeah. Well, we did last night. We hung out with all of the witnesses, and they all shared with what they shared, and holy cow, it was powerful.
Do you have did they? Okay, go ahead, Marisa, and then we'll come back to that.
Okay. So I felt like I was already nervous, but it was just so somber. I mean, just hardly anybody could even crack a smile, and they just were, I'm just so incredibly serious, And so I tried to lighten up the mood a little bit. It didn't work, I don't think, but I just said, so I don't have any handouts and I don't have any witnesses. I just want to say a few words. And I said, I fully support Carson, everything that he says, and everything that he writes and what he just said, but I don't have that same experience. I wasn't that person who felt like I was a bad person for decades because I didn't have a sure knowledge that the church was true. I thought I did have a sure knowledge that the church was true. I was that teenager that got up in fast and testimony meeting and I, almost pounded the pulpit saying that this church is the church of God. And I was, fairly dogmatic and very, very sure of myself. So I had a very different experience, and I have seen over the years Carson and how he's felt about it. And then really that's opened it up to have a lot of other people that we know that will share that with us and see how painful it is for all of them. So I've seen how it is for other people. And I explained a little bit about that, I come from pioneer stock background. I was raised on the BYU fight song that I didn't even apply to any other college, but BYU Provo. I said I was just Mormon in every cell of my body. And I was sure of it. I went, I was a seminary graduate and an institute graduate, and I thought I knew everything about the gospel. And it all made sense to me. I felt really good about it. Where'd you just move my notes?
Sorry.
Okay.
Carson's dinking around, messing up.
He is. He can't.
She's looking over there the whole time, so I want to move it over to you so she can.
He can't keep his hands off the mouse. Yeah. It's like a compulsion. Okay, so I said, as I said in my previous Mormon Stories interview, that over the years, talking to Carson about different difficult subjects in the church, I tried to put a faith-promoting spin on all of it. And then after he had said it was just too painful for him to go to church anymore, then it really forced me to figure out what I thought about it. And as soon as I allowed myself to think, what if the church isn't true? Then it all came together. It all made sense. And it was extremely painful. And I wanted to get across to them, this is the person that you are, that is in this horribly painful situation when you see people in your congregations that are doubting. It's not this prideful thing or this easy thing for anyone. I explained how I couldn't eat and I lost 10 pounds and I was already thin, how I couldn't sleep at night. I felt like I was absolutely shattered. And I said, this is the state that people are in when they are going through a faith crisis. And so I said I felt betrayed that as a seminary and institute graduate that I had been taught so many half-truths and that so much of the whole story was kept from me. And this is unfair. This is a bad thing that we're doing to people in the church, and it's coming out in a lot of now people are disbelieving that they're not able.
We clarified that we don't feel like this is bad people having faith crises. This is the church having a truth crisis that is creating the faith crises in people.
Yeah.
Because people are either being misled or not getting the full story.
Yeah, it's not their fault.
Yeah. So I recounted how I felt like it was important to stand for truth and righteousness, and I realized that I'm still that person. I'm still standing for truth and righteousness, but unfortunately, so much of what I'm now seeing in the church is not truth and sometimes not righteousness. So I said, but still, I didn't want to resign from the church. I wanted to retain my membership because it would hurt my family. And also, I am a Mormon. I've always been a Mormon. It's been, the number one part of my identity. When I was an 8-year-old girl, I was excited to be baptized, and I still respect that. And you don't need to take that away from me. I said my temple marriage is the only wedding that I've ever had. So you don't need to take that away from me because I no longer believe. I said there's room for this church for everyone. That keeping your doubts to yourself is a secret, and that's not healthy. And I've watched people slowly die inside because they can't tell that secret. And it's not good, and we shouldn't be doing that. We have room for those people in the church. We have room for people that state their disbelief. You don't have to agree with them. You just have to love them. And that's what I ended with.
And
Did you get emotional, Marisa?
No. I am the more emotional of the two of us, but I kind of get into the zone when I'm public speaking, and I never do.
She gets a little fired up too, and it didn't come across angry at all. It came across very confident and powerful, which was awesome. I had realized, I looked over my notes when she was talking and realized I'd forgotten one really important thing I wanted to share was in Alma chapter 30, verses 9 and 11, that say the people in the Book of Mormon, they would only punish people for crimes. And it said, we will not punish people for their beliefs or lack of beliefs. And I read that to them and left it there, left it hanging. I'm like, basically, if we're going to go with what the Book of Mormon says, we can't punish people for lack of belief. So It was, I think it was pretty powerful that's the last thing that was said when we walked out of the room, that if they're going to do that, they're going to go against the Book of Mormon. They're going to go against all these statements from the brethren that I've shared, and they're going to excommunicate us because of this cultural belief, not because of all the statements from the scriptures and the brethren. And I know they all felt it. They and we'll get into this later when we talk about what the witnesses, but I know they could feel it. They know that we were doing good and we were being Christ-like, and what our motivation is not anything bad. And I said, if this church is true, with me talking about these difficult issues, that's truth. And if the church is true, it can handle it. And we need to do that because we can't hide it anymore. And that's the fifth document was one of just citations for all these bad things. And actually, I said, I don't want to share this because I don't feel like it's right actually right now. I think I've got my point across. I left it there on the table, and when we came back in later on, they actually handed them out and looked at them. But I felt like I got my point across without having to go slightly negative, and that felt slightly negative to share more of the facts of bad things that happen in the church, because they know that, I think, is there, and they were able to get the point without that.
Okay. All right. So what happened next?
So we left, and it was time for the witnesses, and they wanted witnesses one at a time. So the first witness, a really good friend named Jeremy, he's a very strong believer. He's like known as the biggest smiling guy in the entire stake, and the stake president even said that when he walked in there. His wife left the church because she felt like there wasn't enough Christ in it. She was a convert, and it wore on her too much, and she's like, I need more Christ, and I'm not finding it here, and tried to tell everyone, let's change it so there could be more Christ, and it wouldn't happen, so she left, stopped being Mormon, independent of Marisa, and they actually came together after she had those issues and kind of bonded on some of the frustrations. Mm-hmm. So Jeremy was really traumatized and confused and frustrated, when his wife was going through that, and he actually read the CES letter, and it kind of rocked him, and he's like confused, didn't know what to do. And I reached out to him and I said, Jeremy, I understand how painful that can be. You don't have to like make a decision now. Just look for things that are good and hold on to those good things. I didn't tell him to leave, anything like that. And that actually caused more problems for him because he's like, why is nobody in the church reaching out? Everybody knows what I'm going through and nobody is reaching out to me. The only person reaching out to me is the guy who said he left the church because he doesn't believe in it. And that really rocked his world. He's like, the supposed Christ-like organization is not being Christ-like, and the guy who left the church, and therefore you would assume when you're in the church that he's not Christ-like, is the one who's being that way. And that caused a lot of problem for him. So he just basically went in, shared that, spoke for 2 minutes, and just shared that point. It's like, Carson is, and actually they asked each one, do you want to witness against his charge of apostasy or witness for his character? And all three of them chose, they're like, we can't deny by the definition of apostasy that he's an apostate. We're going to witness for his character, that he's a good person doing good things. So 2 minutes, and then he walked out. And our next friend, Nate Hess, he is the Elders Quorum president right now, and I served with him for a couple years, or a year and a half, whatever. And that's my calling.
As a counselor in the Elders Quorum presidency.
That was my calling when I got kicked out, basically, because I support ordained women. They took my temple recommend away, and since the state calling, you can't have a state calling without a temple recommend, so I lost my calling too, which ironically now you can't do that anymore. But Nate went in and said he gave a very strong, and they'll write this up later on because it was 17 minutes for him and like 30 minutes for the other witness of what they all said. But the gist of it was Carson has been helping tons of people and making a big change in our ward with doing the things that he was doing for years. He helped a lot of people stay in, and he was always open about his doubts and disbeliefs, yet he helped people stay in the church and have happiness in a way that I couldn't reach out to them, in a way that you guys couldn't reach out to them. And that, I think that because of that, we need to let people be like Carson. That's a void that is not getting taken care of. And if we kick him out and we don't do what he's doing, people are going to continue to suffer, and we're going to lose more people than we can keep.
And something he said at the end that I thought was really, really powerful is he said, you guys can all go back to your wards, and none of them were in our ward, none of those high counselors. And, you guys can go back, and but I am the one that is here picking up the pieces in my elders quorum. And, I'm the one that now has to deal with, if the Calderwoods are excommunicated, what that means for all those people who have been doubting for years and who are really on the fence about staying in the church. And now I'm left with that.
It's pretty powerful. And then, so he left.
That's really courageous of him to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's, these friends of mine, they're like, I love them so much more now than I did before. They were good friends before, but man, to stick up for us and what's right and put their images on the line when they know they're going to get judged harshly and stuff, it was, I love them a lot. It means a lot too.
They said they can already feel just over the past few months that they've been basically sympathizers of the apostates, that they say people look at them differently.
And treat them
differently. One was a high priest group leader and one was the elders quorum president, and they're still in their callings and they still go to church every single Sunday, but people are looking at them differently.
That's too bad.
Yeah. So the third guy, Aaron Tyler, went in, and he was the high priest group leader until recently. He actually asked to be released because he said he can't handle it anymore with the tensions that this is creating. Because he's like, one of his points was when he was in there, he's like, I don't want to throw the bishop under the bus because he's a nice guy, but he is a very black and white. You just have a problem, you pray more and you read more. And that was his answer to everybody, every time, every place. And because he's trying to help, and that's what he thinks is the way to help. And, and Aaron, the high priest group leader, said that him as the high priest group leader, Elders Quorum president, and the Relief Society president in the meetings were all saying, we have a problem. This is not working. We got to stop telling people to read more and pray more because it's pushing them away. It's not helping them. And he heard that, but he kept doing it. And the state kept doing it too. And so Aaron said, you guys aren't seeing how this isn't working. And what Carson was doing was working. And he kind of went through my history again. He said, I knew Carson we've known each other for over 10 years. He's like, he's been telling me for over a decade that there are these issues. And I would tell him, and you guys would tell him that he was wrong. And he would always be nice and respond back with like, all right, well, that's kind of how I feel. And he wouldn't be a jerk to us about us being wrong when he knew he was right, because he'd done the research. And we told him to read more when he'd read more than any of us, and maybe more than all of us put together. And then come to find out, the church releases the essays, and Carson was right all along on all these issues. He's like, that was terrible. And our friend Christy, that had left, Jeremy's wife, that left the church because there wasn't enough Christ in it, he said that she opened his eyes to see that was actually true, to drop the pride and the I know what's right. And he realized there wasn't enough Christ, and that allowed him to listen to me and start to deal with issue. He started with blacks in the priesthood, and he went and read it, and he's like, holy crap, Carson was right all this time, that there were things that were difficult. And it kind of rocked his world. And he said, having been through that myself, he understood a little more of the tensions that happen when you have the faith crisis. Even though he's stayed in and he's come to resolution on that, he got the point across of how terrible it is. And he said, so he made 2 points, and fill me in if I miss anything, but basically because what Carson was doing was working and what all of us were doing wasn't working, we can't excommunicate him. We have to be like that to do this. And then the second point was, even if you think he should be excommunicated, you guys, me, we're all responsible for Carson leaving the church because we made the environment too toxic for him. He tried to stay in for years, and he's like, I respect Carson it feels uncomfortable to say this because they were talking so highly of me, but they're like, Carson, I couldn't have done what Carson did. I couldn't have stayed in and been positive for all those years when everyone was saying you're bad and you're wrong. And he says, I wouldn't have lasted like Carson did, and I feel so bad. We're responsible for making that too toxic for Carson. We kicked Carson out of the church. And if we excommunicate him, we're excommunicating him for something that we did, and that's on us. And he walked out with that. And so they heard those three witnesses. They heard me put forth the argument that the prophets and apostles have evidence that we should do what I'm doing instead of drawing lines and pushing people out and judging. They all gave witness that what I've done has helped and what they've done hasn't helped. And everyone said, all three witnesses said that they could see it resonated with everybody, that they were like nodding their heads and they were emotional and they were softening, except for the one guy. And that we all actually thought they're not going to do it. We kind of had the hope at that point that it's not going to happen. And then
So they deliberated for a while and then brought us in, and we thought they were done. But they said that they just wanted to ask us a question. And so they asked.
I think that they were like, okay, they sensed that, like, I don't want to excommunicate them. If they can be repentant, let's not excommunicate them. If they're not, we'll excommunicate them. I think that's the conclusion they'd come to.
Yeah, at that point. So they asked if we were to retain our membership in the church, what, if anything, would change? And Carson answered first.
I said, I was like confused. I was like, whoa, I was not expecting this. And I thought about it, and I'm like, nothing is going to change. I'll keep being like I am. And I kind of pointed the papers again. I'm like, this is the truth. And they're like, well, would you submit to your bishop on things you're going to say in public about how to do it? And I was like,
would you allow the bishop and the stake presidency to counsel you on the things that you put forth?
I had a really hard time not saying, oh, hell no. The guy, I was like, there's no way in heck I'm going to do that. But obviously that would not.
They were asking if they could censor him.
Yeah.
And when they explained it that way, then it was like, absolutely not.
And I actually got a little frustrated. And I said, I might change my ideas on the interpretations of some of these historical things that happened. I'm definitely open to that. But I'm not going to change my morality, compromise my integrity on thinking that the truth has nothing to fear. The truth will set us free. And if the church is true, it therefore has nothing to fear as well. So let's deal with these things instead of hiding them. And I will not compromise on that. I'm not going to change. And I got like a little bit of like intensity in my voice. And then when Marisa spoke and after, I'm like, I want to apologize for the frustration I had before, because I knew they were going to see he's lost his spirit. And I'm like, it's hard for me to not be frustrated when I see so many people suffering, and they don't have to. We could just be a little more Christ-like and open, and they wouldn't have to suffer like this. And it's really frustrating for me to hear that and feel that. And then that's kind of where we ended. But that was after Marisa spoke.
What'd you say, Marisa?
I just said, I already try to be respectful of the church, even if I disagree with it, because my friends and family are still in it, and because I grew up with it, like I explained. So I don't think that being a member or not being a member would change that I'm still going to have a level of respect for the church in my statements, but that I am going to continue saying what I think either way.
And I guess I did say that if I lose my membership, I will feel the freedom to be more open and honest in exactly how I feel. So I didn't want to throw it down as a challenge, but I'm like, that's the truth. I actually am filtering a little more because I still am a member. But if you kick me out, then it's like I'm not going to be as filtered as I otherwise would have been.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then what?
Then we waited for probably another hour, right? It was a long, long time. And we got so bored. We were talking about financial markets.
It was really boring. But and I was getting sleepy because we've been up.
It was almost midnight.
Yeah. And so they invite us in at about 11:35, 11:40, and they sit us down. And the stake president, he looked to me like he had been sobbing. His face was just so someone. You can tell when someone's been crying and you walk in. He looked like that, and I was like, oh man, I knew it was hard. Having it take a long time, I'm like, they struggled. I know we pressured, and that's the problem. That's why we have been such an issue, is because they know we're good people trying to do good things, and it creates such a conflict for them to kick someone out for being good and doing good. And I know that was conflicting for them. And so he sat down and he said, and I actually got a little irritated for the first time. He said, we find you in a state of apostasy. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he's like, you want to tell Jesus Christ how to run Jesus Christ's church. And I was like, I interrupted him, and I'm like, that's not true. I feel like we, the people and the brethren, could change the way we are doing things to help be more Christ-like. And I was really, really pissed off, because it's like every single freaking thing I said and all the witnesses weren't saying we're telling Jesus Christ how to run the church. We're saying we're using the words of the brethren. They're telling us what we need to do to be more like Christ. And the fact that he said that, I feel like he didn't listen, but I know that he did. And so I was like, I think this exemplifies perfectly how this system makes good people feel pressured to do bad things to other good people. It's like he's a great man, and he struggled mightily with that decision because he knew in his heart it wasn't the right thing to do. I really feel that. He knew it shouldn't have done it, but he feels that if that's what the brethren are saying, even though we have the quotes doing the other stuff, we need to keep all these doubts in the closet. And because we don't say we don't believe, that's opening the door for others to not believe as well, and they're afraid that'll make people leave, and that's the crux of it. He couldn't do what was right because of the fear. And to me, it's like, after all these quotes I said, it's like they're acting like the church isn't true, and they know it, and it has something to fear. Because if they knew the church was true and had nothing to fear, they wouldn't have to worry about us, and they could have not excommunicated us and allowed there to be a great amount of love, but they chose the other way.
And the way they said it was, the Lord has decided that you should both be excommunicated for apostasy.
Which was ironic, because he says, you're getting excommunicated because you're speaking for the Lord, here, telling Jesus Christ how he should run his church. Yet they were doing that, and I know that's not what they felt in their hearts. Maybe they went in and prayed, whatever. I'm not a believer. I wasn't there. I can't speak for them, but everything I felt from them, it was very strong. They knew that was the loving thing to do, and didn't do it.
Okay.
And the three witnesses all felt the same way, who are active, believing members. So it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people all feeling one thing, and the others didn't. So
after they told us the decision, then they implored us to be rebaptized in a year, and said we had to wait at least a year. Of course, they said we can't wear our garments, we can't pay tithing.
We had a hard time not smiling,
not laughing
when they said that, because we're like, one, we don't,
Shoot.
and two, yeah, darn.
Yeah. Are you sure I can't? No. So, and then they really implored us for us to allow the church to raise our children. That, they said this is the best place for them, and they could still come here. It takes a village, and we really want to help you in that way. And at that point, there was really just no need to, come back against anything that they were saying. And so we just held our tongues. We feel more than confident that we can raise our children with better values than we learned in the church, but it's fine.
Yeah. And we were trying to stay really cordial and nice, and we said, yeah, our kids still want to do scouts, and all of our friends and their friends are still in the church, so we're going to still, be friends with everyone, let them do scouts, and that's kind of where we're at. So that was it. And we came out.
The stake president offered a long prayer at the end where he talked a lot about, that the Lord would help us all to understand this in our hearts and help us to come to a greater understanding. And I almost laughed because everything he said, if you twisted it another way, I could believe it. I could agree with that 100% if you were thinking about it, that, please help all of these men in this room understand the things that we've been trying to say. And so then they asked if we would go around and shake everyone's hand. And
I wish we wouldn't have.
That was rough. It kind of was. A few of the guys said to me, we hope you come back. And a couple of them that we knew a little more gave us hugs. And a couple were really nice.
Yeah, there's a few people in there that we love. And it was great. And the one guy who was negative, that all of us felt was negative the whole time, it's like, I wanted to just walk past him, but I shook his hand and tried to be as nice as I could, and we left.
So it was awkward, but.
And then when we walked out and told our witnesses that were there that it's double excommunication, man, they were distraught. I felt bad for him because we don't believe, we don't care. It was slightly vindicating that if this organization that I don't think is Christ's church is going to kick me out for being Christ-like, bam, that was the closing stamp on it. The good decision, you guys, Carson and Marisa. And it was very vindicating. We felt very good and happy. But, man, our friends that were still in, to see that their church that they love, these people they love would do that, it broke their hearts. And I felt bad for them. Mm-hmm. And we were obviously sad because of the precedent it sets. Mm-hmm. All of the other people, I actually spoke to him about the one guy that they all know in the stake that is getting eaten up from the inside because he doesn't believe, his wife does, so he tries to stay to make her happy, and he can't be authentic. He can't talk about it all because of the shame he'll get. And I'm like, this is terrible for him. They could have helped people like that, and they're choosing not to. Mm-hmm.
So were there people still outside when he came outside?
Yeah, there were quite a few. I mean, they waited it out 4.5 hours. Wow. And it was dark and it was getting cold. And there was even a woman who had a little girl who was maybe 8 or 10 years old. And she was still there, still wide awake and telling us all about her experiences. And people mostly, I think, just there to welcome us into the world of ex-Mormonism. And there were maybe only 10 people left.
Some of them were at the restaurant, and then they came back.
It closed at midnight, the restaurant did, and so then they came back over to the parking lot.
And the three witnesses were so distraught. They're like, I can't go home. I'm too brokenhearted and worked up right now. So we sat outside and talked with them for a half hour or so and took those pictures and bonded some more over the love we felt for each other, and then went home and went to bed.
I thought our one friend was going to be sobbing. Like, he's very emotional anyway. And, but he was angry. And he said he was even surprised at himself that he was angry. But that, that they could say all of that and that they could still seem to be somewhat hard-hearted.
So, Marisa, how did it feel getting excommunicated? And are you glad you went through with it?
Yeah, I am. It was really stressful. And honestly, like at one point in the middle of it, I was just like thinking almost, why are we really here? Like, of course it would have been so much easier to just resign. But a lot of the people that gathered in the parking lot for us, they said both online and in person, I resigned from the church, and in a way I wish I hadn't. Sometimes they didn't really have a choice. Maybe their spouse was still active and they didn't want to put them through that. But for a lot of reasons, people were happy that we were being their voice. And whether they couldn't or whether they had just chosen not to. And so it was a real physical manifestation of why we're here. That we really are doing this to raise awareness and to be a voice for those people and for a lot of people. So even though, like I said, my leg was shaking and I thought, we could be doing a lot more fun things right now on this Thursday night, it was worth it. And certainly I don't regret it. And it stinks to be excommunicated. It seems really surreal, like after 35 years of full activity in the church.
Laying in bed that night, we're excommunicated. It was so bizarre.
It's almost incomprehensible, really. But it's okay. Emotionally, I feel okay, just like I said earlier, because I know what's in my heart and I know I'm still standing for truth and righteousness. So I'm okay with myself.
Carson,
but it's weird.
How about you, Carson?
Yeah, same thing. It's I haven't been a believer since I got home, since I went through the temple on my way home from my mission in 1997. So almost 20 years, and I tried and tried and tried, and it felt, maybe it was a little immature to be that way, but it felt so vindicating to have the conclusion that I was afraid to make and accept for all those years, that this isn't God's one true church. Even though there's a lot of good in it, even though some of the people may be inspired at times, I know without, it's been proved to me over and over again that it's not God's one true church. And to have them kick me out for being Christ-like, it felt really good that I had made the right decision. And that if I died right now and God's up in heaven, even if God is Mormon, I know he'll be happy with me. He's like, well, with the stuff I gave you, Carson, you made the best decision you could, and you tried so hard to be a good person and to be a loving person. So I have no fear. I have no fear at all.
So what's the future for you guys?
We want to do the same thing, just help it so that people that are going through these faith transitions don't have to suffer. And I don't care. If you want to stay a member, go for it. If that's where you need to be, but I want you to I want people, one, to have the full information, and two, if that causes stress for you, I want to be there to help them not suffer. Give them ways to rebuild their lives to wherever they choose that takes for them. And for us personally, we're going to it's not a huge change. We've always been very scientific minded and very critical thinkers. And so that's why our kids haven't had a problem with us leaving. They're proud of us. Our oldest is almost 14. He had problems with the church too, especially the LGBTQ things. That bothered him a lot. And he's proud of us, and they're excited, and we have all this time we can spend on each other now. It's awesome.
How about you, Marisa? What's up for you?
I feel like the world is just so much bigger. I really am. I'm happy to put it behind me in this way, even though I think whether we were excommunicated or not, it would be just kind of a milestone, and where we felt like we did our part, and I'm just ready to move on. And I read like the book The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown, and like I love thinking about things in new ways, and it just seems like there's so much positive to move on to.
Instead of reading the war chapters one more time in Alma, we can go read some book like that and make a big change in our life, instead of thinking, why am I doing this? Oh yeah, there's this one little teeny thing that could maybe help me that I've read 20 times.
Mm-hmm. And I feel completely free to kind of embrace certain concepts from the bottom of my heart with no reservations. I read the book called The Four Agreements, and it talks about using your word for good, even with yourself, and not taking things personally, not making assumptions, just some really basic things. But I feel like I don't have to reserve a little portion of myself for what the church says, or, to just be 100% authentically me, and just feel what I really feel about this. What do I really think, and what do I really want to do moving forward? Just all the way from the bottom of my heart with no reservations.
Are you worried about raising your kids not in the church?
We were, and then
Right.
we saw some studies that show they'd done some semi-longitudinal ones that showed that the kids who grew up in Christian religions had less empathy than the ones who grew up with an agnostic morality, which a lot of people in the church think, well, if you're agnostic, you have no morality, but it's so not true. We're very and rather than saying agnostic, I like to say I'm a secular humanist, because we all have good inside of us. It's there. We're not broken that we need Christ to fix us. We're good ourselves. We have that goodness in us. We need to let that grow. And so the studies show that the kids who were raised with that secular humanism had more empathy. They were more kind. They gave more in times of need. And it's like, that was so exciting. We're like, sweet, we can make our kids better. We don't have to be scared. We can be happy, positive, and they'll turn out even better now.
Mm-hmm.
Keep all the good from Mormonism, because there's good there. Add the good to it.
How about you,
Recently, we joined a local group, called Maple Valley Atheist Agnostic Group, and they were doing a book club on that book I mentioned earlier called Parenting Beyond Belief. And there's a companion to it that's a more practical guide called Raising Free Thinkers. And so that was the book that they were doing the book club on. And so we both read it and went into this book club, and it was just like amazing, all these people who think similarly to us, or even if they don't on some points, you can just have this open and free discussion. And just that very idea of free thinking, it's almost just, it's compelling. It's intoxicating. And we'd never met these people before, but we thought, this is really awesome. This is what we're looking forward to.
So what are your Sundays like now?
Just family days.
Way less stress.
All of our friends still are going to church, so our kids don't even really have the option to play with friends. So we just do stuff together. And it just feels, like you said, so much less stressful. And we can do things that we enjoy. We're bonding. No matter what we do, we feel happy together.
Yeah. Instead of spending all Sunday afternoon making my seminary lessons for the week, or doing my elders quorum presidency meeting, and then doing my home teaching and make up home teaching for the people that didn't do it. All those things that I did for so many years. Feeling guilty that I'm leaving my kids at home with the wife or whatever. All that guilt and tension is gone, and we can just love and be together.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel closer as a couple than you did a year or 5 years ago?
Definitely.
Yeah. We had a few months of therapy with Dr. Finlayson Fife before we left the church, and now several months after. And as I've been looking back on it, I realized that we never could have resolved some of the issues that we had if we didn't leave the church. That I don't know that it's like this for all people, but it was coming between us. And we for sure are closer than we've ever been.
Yeah, maybe not between us, but you were feeling like you had to be something that didn't feel right for you. And I wanted you to be more, and you felt like you couldn't. Like, now she can go get her PhD in psychology if she wants. She doesn't have to feel guilty for the kids and me, and I want her to be that. And so she's not feeling that tension from me saying, go do more, thinking God doesn't want me to, and all that. So it's like we can just be who we want.
I think more than that is that I was feeling a lot of resentment towards Carson, and for not being who I wanted him to be, and which is more of a believer, and then also for being the patriarch, even though he wasn't trying to put me down in that role, I still felt resentment that I felt second class.
Sure.
And I we just had a bad frame for marriage also, where we were enmeshed. We felt like, the gospel says we're supposed to be one. And so it really started to be that we were all over each other, that we didn't allow a degree of differentiation, and I think we just learned how to be more healthy with a strong sense of self. But my head was so crowded with all these things that I should do and all of these things that I had learned in my life as a member, that to be able to put that down and realize what we really need to do to improve personally and relationally, it's made a huge difference.
And kids are happier or less happy?
I think they are all happier.
Yeah, for sure.
Our oldest is relieved, and he just loves to discuss difficult topics, or he loves to be a free thinker, and I think he even feels more free to do that now. And the other kids, I think they just are really responding positively to the extra family time and to mom and dad being happier and just a better vibe.
Yeah, they keep saying they're so happy they don't have to go sit for 3 hours on Sundays in church.
Yeah.
That's all they care about. That's like the little ones. It's funny.
All right. Well, we'll give you guys each a final closing statement of thoughts or impressions or whatever. Real quick, you don't have any sense for what was discussed between the High Council. You don't know. There's no.
Man, I wish I knew.
Yeah.
But
That'd be fun. Well, if any of them are listening, send me a private email. I'll keep your confidence, and you guys can tell us what that conversation was like.
That would be awesome.
All right, Carson, closing statement. Then we're going to give Marisa the last word.
All right. I think so. Anticipating that we would be excommunicated, I made that graphic that's my Facebook image of that we are apostates. I wear that with pride now. I love being an apostate against an organization that hurts people and didn't have the ability that made it so that good people didn't go with their hearts. And so I said in there that so many good people are seeing this and leaving the church that people can't easily say, oh, apostate equals bad. They have loved ones. Almost everybody has someone close to them that's left the church now. It's gotten so big and it's snowballing. And I think that if you're afraid, if you aren't living authentically and you have the doubts, just hopefully, this can inspire you. Stand up, be true to yourself, and help this grow. Help there be more kindness and truth in the world. If, truth has nothing to fear, so shed light on it. And if it's good, we'll realize it's good, and if it's bad, we can put it aside and look for more good. And that's what I hope we can all do. It'd be awesome.
All right, Marisa, final word.
So if anyone hasn't seen Lindsey Sterling, the Mormon dancing violinist, her video for the song called Shatter Me, I would highly recommend it. Go to YouTube and look up Shatter Me, Lindsey Sterling. She's a ballerina playing the violin in the middle of a snow globe, and she's trapped in the snow globe, and outside of her she sees something flying by, and she can't tell, is it a butterfly or is it a scary bat? And she has a scared look on her face, and she just feels trapped inside this bubble. And she starts to realize that if she plays her violin, that as it starts to create cracks in the porcelain doll figure that she is, and her light is coming out. And after a while, she plays and plays and plays, and then the whole shell shatters, and the light is just coming out of her, and she realizes that the light was always within her. And the snow globe breaks, and she sees that there's not a scary world around her, that she's standing on the top of a mountain, and now she can see everything. And it was butterflies that were flying by. And it's goodness that's outside. And that resonates with me like more than anything else, because the light is inside of us and the goodness is inside of us. And all we have to do is let it out, and there is a beautiful world out there.
Beautiful. Well, bless you both for your courage and your love and for standing for truth.
Thank you, John.
You have thousands of people who are just really grateful and who you've really helped. So bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, keep up. I think the best thing we can do is just shine our light, and that's the best thing we can all do, is just be the best people we can be. And I think you guys are a great example of that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity.
All right. Bless you, and stay in touch.
Definitely.